Well, hello friends. Thank you for joining me today. I am, as promised, finally getting around to doing this video that I've been looking forward to doing literally for years, ever since I did my pen and ink cross-hatching Masters Edition. I've been anxious to do the next in the series. Well, I had one in between called Vintage Edition, which was pretty also significant, but this is one that I've been really looking forward to. As you see, I'm calling it Pen and Ink Cross-Hatching, or Pen and Ink State of the Art. Now, I know that's a pretty audacious or bodacious statement, I know. So at the very least, I can say, well, it's the state of my art. That is true. And it is also true that I don't know anybody else that does what. And I'm not saying does better pen and ink drawing. That's very much open for, that's a good possibility that somebody does it better. But I will say I don't know anybody certainly that does this technique, or honestly, that does a more sophisticated approach to pen and ink cross-hatching. So let me show you what that means. First of all, a little bit about the tools. I'm going to be doing this entire illustration with Rapido Graf pens. That's what these are. They typically have a cap on them, right? So there's the full pen. Here it is. And here's, why do I have 8 of them? Well, the reason is because I have 8 different colors: dark brown, light brown, blue, magenta, green, violet, orange, and yellow. As they get, the lighter colors have larger bore, larger points. The darker colors up here have a finer point. So that's one thing. The kind of ink, if you will, is not ink at all. The kind of ink that I'm using in these brushes is Aeroflash by Holbein. Now, a representative from Holbein told me that they're no longer making this, and he should know. But when I went and looked it up online, it looked like there was still quite a bit of available online from various art distributors. Now, if I'm wrong about that, then please contact Holbein right here and ask them, what do you have? Because I know they have a replacement product. I just don't know what it's called. But this is a very fine liquid acrylic. Very, very fine liquid acrylic. And was made for airbrushes. So if it's good enough for an airbrush, it's good enough for a technical pen. And if you ever have to clean this out of an airbrush or a technical pen, you want to clean it out with denatured alcohol. Hello, Bubble Pop. Good to have you on board. Let me take just a minute. Oh, wait. No, let me finish the tools that I'm using. So I'm doing colored ink, right, in Rapido Graf pens on Dendreal Multimedia Vellum. Now, I have a few pieces of it here just to show you what it's like. So if I take this and put it on top of this lettering, sorry, there we go. That gives you some idea how transparent it is, okay? It's that transparent. Hey, Carrie, thank you. Glad you were there at Harbor Fest. Had a great time there. And again, here are the 4, where did that come from? Here are the 8 colors that I've tested on this little practice sheet. So this is the material that I'm drawing on, okay? Now, let me show you some of my previous work along this line, but I still haven't given you the full story of, again, what makes this state of the art. But here is an illustration that I did, oh my goodness, 10 years ago at least. And it's done on that kind of mylar with pen and ink and in colored ink on mylar. Now, on this particular one, I only worked on the front and the back of this piece of mylar. And it's, I don't know if you can see it, it's multicolored. Up here in the clouds, I see red, purple, blue, yellow, orange. And then this also has just a tiny bit of airbrush on it. I will probably do some airbrush on the illustration I'm doing today, but I won't. That's a final decision. Here's another illustration that I did. Now this one goes back 30 years. So this is early in my days of experimenting with this pen and ink on Mylar. So this is almost all brown ink, various shades of brown, a little bit of blue ink over here, and just a little bit of airbrush. So this hangs up in my studio downstairs. That's why it's got specks of paint splattered all over it, because this is hanging up down there. Okay, so that's stuff that I did 30 years ago. What's going to make this particular? Well, I've done several pieces in between. I don't have them here, but here's the answer. Here's what makes it, I think, state-of-the-art, is I'm going to do not one, not two, but 3 or 4 layers of vellum, of this translucent, plasticky feeling paper, okay? So I will draw, again, let me turn the light table on so you can see the image. I will draw on the front of this, and the gloves, of course, are to keep the oils from my hands off the vellum. I will draw on the front of this, and I'll turn it over and I'll draw on the back. Then I'll take another piece of Mylar, of vellum, just like this, and I will do more layers of cross hatching, which of course will, if they're underneath this, they'll be lighter. Now I may do a layer on top of this. I don't know. I doubt it. I think this is going to be my topmost layer. Typically, I work from the top down, and I have done this. I've done 3 projects using this technique already. I learned some things in the first. They turned out fine, but I did learn several things, and that's why I'm calling this state-of-the-art pen and ink cross hatching. And I'm going to continue drawing here for just a little while. This could get dreadfully boring to watch because, as you can imagine, this is a really, really slow process. I expect this illustration, I will have to keep my butt in this chair and do cross-hatching for probably 30 hours. I hope not more than that. I really hope, but it's possible. I showed you a pen and ink illustration. Well, my pen and ink vintage illustration, I estimate, has over 100 hours of cross-hatching in it. But of course, it's about 3 times as big, which I'm not going to make that mistake again. And I go back and forth, as you can see, between different levels of lighting. This way it shows up the most. It the drawing underneath shows up really well, but I can't see. I don't really have a realistic appraisal of the marks that I'm making on the vellum. Does that make sense? I can't tell exactly what the marks look like. So I'm usually working in a sort of a compromise lighting situation, much like this. So here I am working on her face. And by the way, this is all of this is for the cover of a book. I've already finished all the inside illustrations. I did 48 illustrations for the inside of this book. It's called Breaking Free with Broken Wings, a novel, Tim Paulson, illustrated by Dan Nelson. And again, this is the cover. Just if you haven't been following me the last couple of days, let me show you again what it is that I'm copying. I spent quite a bit of time, as you know, or may know if you followed me, doing a very fine charcoal illustration. This is charcoal, and it's now sprayed. Before I sprayed it, I scanned it and then sprayed it, because the spray often corrupts the illustration slightly, which it absolutely did in this case, very slightly. So I'm not dismayed, but I'm glad that I scanned it before I did the final coat of workable fixative. So that's the illustration. And here's a photograph of my daughter. I took, as you can see, well, this isn't the right one. There we go. I took several photographs of my daughter, and you can see that I used her for the body. I changed her face to match the girl in the book. She's running, escaping, if you will, from the dark woods, coming into the light of day, if you will. So that's the preparatory work that I did for this illustration. And now I am doing the pen and ink work. I think that's rather obvious, isn't it? I keep a Post-it note always, or a number of Post-it notes, because the Rapido Graf pen, they get gunked up very easily. So you have to put them up there and roll them slightly. And I wish I could zoom you guys in a lot more than that, but that's about all I can do. Now, for those of you who are watching online, I'm going to go ahead and let you see something else. I'm actually going to turn this this particular video into a produced and edited video. And for that, I'm going to be using footage from this camera. And as you can imagine, as you can see right now, with this other camera, I can capture extreme close-ups, which I find artists always appreciate. Artists want to be able to see, really see what's going on. So after I finish editing this video, it will be available on my YouTube channel as well. And it will be called Pen and Ink Cross Hatching State of the Art. And I'm going to try to take advantage of my one video that has really gone viral, which is Pen and Ink Cross Hatching Masters Edition, and try to get people to, when they look at that one, to come over and check out this one as well. So I'll be capturing quite a bit of footage, especially close-up stuff, using this other camera. And if you want to see if you want to see right now, what does this look like, then simply in YouTube, do a search for Pen and Ink Cross Hatching, and my video will probably come up first. And you'll see that much of that video was shot in just this manner. So you can see what a close-up like this is going to look like. So I don't know if it made sense to you all. Let me explain it again. That I've got 8 different colors of ink in all these Rapido Graf pens. And right now I'm using the darkest and the most neutral tone. It's not black. It's a dark, neutral brown. That is a grayish brown, very dark, almost black, but not quite. Black, I feel, for this technique is just it's sort of like painting, just a little too strong. So I'm using instead what is essentially a dark, warm gray, almost black. And I'll be doing all those other colors, some of them right here on this layer. Let me put this guy back for a minute. Okay. I'll videotape the whole process, but just for those of you who are watching the beginning of it right now, I'll put some of these colors right on this surface, on this top layer, but most of those colors are going to be in the under layers. So of course, the further down I go, the more subtle the cross hatching becomes, the more subtle the lines become. Does that make sense? And again, forgive me if there's anybody else on the planet doing this, but I don't know of anybody. But I'd be delighted to start a movement. I don't mean that in a pride kind of way. I mean that in a just like, come on, give it a try, somebody. Somebody take what I'm doing and better me. Take it to the next level, whatever that may be. Or take your better skill and do something even better than what I'm doing. That would be wonderful. There's several thoughts that have come to mind over the years. One is, like, here I am working on a light table. How would it be? This is sort of fine arts, weird fine arts-ish. How would it be if the final artwork actually was designed to be backlit the entire time? So you could really have a luminous effect going through multiple layers of mylar or this translucent vellum. That would be fun. You could also intersperse the translucent layers with transparent layers. That would be fun as well. Or you could do the whole thing on nothing but transparent. Instead of making each layer translucent, let it be transparent and use more and more transparent inks as you go. Anyway, there are all kinds of options. Yeah, and I'd love to see somebody else take the challenge and say, hey, that's cool. I think I can do better. And I'd say, go for it, man. Go for it. Nothing's patented. Everything's just fun. I will say that I've tried a couple of times to contact the Kohinoor people, the name that's on these brushes, and try to get them to use some of my stuff for their marketing. Back in the olden days, okay, before most of you were alive, that's a slight exaggeration, I'm sure, but back in the olden days, the Rapido Graf Pen was the workhorse of the graphic arts industry. Now, I know it's almost hard for me to believe now, but for the first 10 years, maybe more, maybe 15, for the first 10 or 15 years of my graphic arts journey, working as a graphic designer, if we wanted a straight line on something, believe it or not, we had to draw it. Gasp! Can you imagine? No mouses, no Mises, no Wacom tablets, no, a whole bunch of stuff inside, no computers at all. And there were a couple ways to get straight lines. Of course, we had typesetting way, way back in the day, linotype typesetting. And we had, that was kind of like early computer stuff. I'm talking in the late 70s, early 80s. Actually, well into the mid and late 80s. But if we wanted a straight line, we could also use tape. We could get literally a piece of black tape and stretch it out on our board, our design illustration board, and cut it off at each end with an X-Acto knife. Cut it off square at each end, and that was your black line. Isn't that amazing? Hard to believe. So we graphic designers used a lot of these pens in graphic arts to draw straight lines. That is just crazy. Now, the reason that most people had several of these because they come in various thicknesses, various widths. Right now I'm using a 0.25 millimeter, I think, I'm not sure, or also called a 000, triple aught. I think there are 2 sizes smaller than this, and there are about 5 sizes larger than this. This is toward the small end, and frankly, this is as small. Let me do a close-up again for you guys on the video, on the edited video. There we go. That's as small as I want to get, because much smaller than this, and let me say that again. It's much smaller than this, and the technical issues and problems just become almost insurmountable. You're just cleaning the brush, the pen so often you can hardly get any drawing done, and then it finally just dies on you. So the 0.25 is about as small as I went on a regular basis. And actually the one just larger than this, just a little more dependable. The bigger they are, the easier they are to maintain. And I used to think that they were the worst, most finicky tool on the planet. Oh, until I started airbrushing. Then I had to come back and repent to all my Rapido Graf pens because the difficulties associated with airbrushing were even more extreme than the difficulties associated with Rapido Graf pens. So I can't imagine how anybody could be an airbrush artist if they don't have a generous dose of obsessive compulsive in their personality, as I do. I just can't imagine, because you have to be so finicky with an airbrush. And well, you have to be just about that finicky to use a Rapido Graf pen as well. Thankfully, in the last several minutes while I've been talking, my pen has been behaving quite nicely, which is not always the case. We do a lot of pounding and shaking, pounding this side up with a Rapido Graf pen. Whoops, I just got a fat line. I'll either come back and shave that line down with an X-Acto knife looking through a magnifying glass, or by the time I get other layers on top of it, it won't matter. And as you can see, I do a lot of drawing tiny little dots at the beginning and end of my stroke, just to aid in the illusion of shading here. Now, so far, of course, in this illustration, let me turn it off so you can see what I've done. Okay? So far, that is not cross-hatching, right? That's just hatching with no cross. I'm going to cover basically, I think, this entire page, this entire illustration with hatching. Let's call it that. I'll do a little bit of scribble hatching like I did here on these vines. Scribble hatching is what I call, this is what you do. Normally, with cross hatching or hatching, you draw on the downstroke only. Down, down, you pick up the pen, pick up the pen, pick up the pen, and so forth. But scribble hatching is precisely twice as fast as that because you draw in both directions. So you're actually getting a series of tiny V's, one V going this way, then the next V going that way. See, and they're all connected. So it's not as clean a technique because you get all these little points at both ends. But it has a different feel, and I will certainly be doing some of that in this illustration. But once I get the whole first layer done on this entire illustration, then I will probably, for the second layer, I'll turn it over, at which point, see, I have the illustration, the drawing taped to the back of the Mylar, right? And then I'll start drawing on the back. And then I'll go from there, back and forth, back, front, back, front, back, front, back, and then begin adding additional layers of Mylar. Now, one of the lessons I learned in the couple times that I've done this, one of the hard lessons I learned is do not try to glue the layers of Mylar together. I did that once and lived to regret it. It's okay. The client doesn't know any better. it just you got air bubbles in the glue, and it was just very difficult. So The only downside of this technique, if you will, if there is a downside, is that in order to display this artwork, at least until I think of something better, in order to display it, it would need to be under glass, with the glass pressing all the layers together. And I don't like glass on top of artwork. But of course, the primary purpose of this illustration, of course, it's an illustration to go on the cover of a book, so that doesn't matter at all. It'll be compressed when it's in the scanner. The lid of the scanner will compress all the layers down, and it'll work just fine. So what my client does with the original artwork is entirely up to him. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Let me turn on these lights again so you can just get a little bit more feel of what that's going to look like. And I'll bring you back, I believe, later this afternoon when I've made some good progress. Some people have asked me, does this ever get boring? Are you kidding? Yes, of course it gets boring. It gets dreadfully boring. So as soon as I hang up with you guys, I'm going to put on a podcast, and I'm going to listen to some science or history or philosophy, something that really engages my brain, so that I can just keep my hand moving, just keep drawing and drawing and drawing and drawing while I am entertained, while the other side of my brain is, the left side of my brain, shall we say, is being engaged by some interesting topics. So that's how I'm going to do it. Hope that's interesting. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back in just